The Boondocks is one of the greatest shows ever created, period, for several reasons. A lot of people don't like the Boondocks approach, how they use the N-word, the language that they use. Some people feel like it highlights stereotypes in the black community, but I actually think it does the opposite in a satirical fashion. The satire is used to subliminally tell messages to the African American community and highlight some of the issues that we have, and it's written so well, and just it's comical, but it's actually real things going on in society, like the episode of Return of Dr. King, when they had this concept that Dr. King wasn't assassinated. Instead, he was shot and put into a coma, and when he woke up, he was ashamed and astonished at how a lot of black people were carrying themselves and a lot of the things that they were doing, in spite of him risking his life for a lot of the freedoms that we have, going to integrated schools, living and working in environments with people of different ethnicities, specifically Caucasian Americans. So it really highlights a lot of the things that we have to think about. Also, it highlights stuff that a lot of people don't want to talk about. For one, the R. Kelly trial, the trial of Robert Kelly, that talks about how, despite the heinous things that R. Kelly did on camera, a lot of black people, and people in general, but black people in particular in the black community, they excuse it and push it to the back of their mind because of how great R. Kelly was. And it was the scene where Riley says, we all know the dude can sing. We know he can sing. But listen, this does not take away from what he did to a child. And that was the real truth. And a lot of people don't want to hear it. And in the scene, even when Huey made that speech about how we should hold him accountable, and every black man that goes to jail is a Nelson Mandela and everything, the people still turn on the music and start dancing to R. Kelly music. They didn't care what Huey was saying. And that's, a lot of people became deaf. A lot of the R. Kelly trial fell on deaf ears because a lot of people in the black community were so into R. Kelly's music that we push it to the back of our heads. He also tackles controversial topics that can't exist, such as homosexuality in rap music, or a rapper that come around and be homosexual. A lot of people don't want to imagine that, but it's probably happened before, we just don't know it. You know what I mean? It probably has happened. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it probably has happened. And if not, it probably will happen in the future. Also, it talked about a lot of different things. For one, it was an episode about, it was one episode, and they talk about soul food. The show Soul Food, where black families gather around and make food for each other. They progress through their issues over a Sunday meal, which consists of a lot of the things that harm and kill the black community, such as swine, pig, a lot of high sodium intake that kills us. And Huey even makes the joke and says, he talks about the Soul Food. Soul Food is about a movie that it's about a family that goes through hardships, and their grandmother dies from diabetes. And he said to get through the issue, the family keeps gathering together every Sunday and eat the same food that killed Big Mama. And that's a problem in the black community. Also, they talk about a lot of things. In the episode Granddad's Fight, which I think is the greatest episode of the Boondocks, period, hands down. And that episode, they talk about how things can be triggered issues in the black community can be triggered over small things and lead to a big disaster, such as stepping on somebody's shoe or bumping into a person, and it can explode into a whole crazy thing. And Huey, the things play out, but Huey always reflects on how things could have happened differently. One, you can go and argue with a crazy ignorant person because you stepped on his shoe, or you can just go ahead, toss it up, leave it in the wind, and keep going with your life. And don't let one small incident affect the rest of your life. You know what I mean? And that actually happened to me on the train not too long ago. You know what I mean? But anyway, you can keep it moving, or you can cause a scene out of nothing. I really just like how Aaron McGruder, he put together these. Oh, absolutely. We can't forget about Uncle Ruckus. He's a staple character. He's a character that's a black man who essentially hates his black skin. He hates being black so much that he loves white people and always compliments white people and talks down on black people consistently. He always goes out of his way to pull down black people in order to uplift white Americans. And in reality, we have a lot of those people in society, whether it's in the workplace or just in regular everyday life. You see people who brown nose, who kiss up, and what we call cooning. They do it all the time. And Uncle Ruckus's character represents the modern day coon in the black society. People that people that always just love talking down on their own people instead of trying to help. And Uncle Ruckus represents that character. He has a Confederate flag in his house and always talks about how he's Irish. He hates the idea of being black so much that he created this idea that he said was passed along from his mother, that this idea that he has revitiligo, where his skin gets darker and darker and blacker. And he was actually born a white man. He feeds into this concept and it's in his head so much that he can't see anything other than that. And he always talks down on his people. And it represents the newscasters, these people in publications, not newscasters, these people in these broadcast media or print media that talk down on black people or just throw us under the bus every chance they get instead of trying to go to these communities and help. They talk down on Colin Kaepernick, people like that. That's who Uncle Ruckus represents. Also is an episode called Thank You for Not Snitching, and how we in the black community have a problem with snitching or telling on somebody else, right? Now, this is the thing. We always say you shouldn't snitch. We even had the Stop Snitching movement with the Stop Snitching on the stop sign was on the shirt, right? But that episode talks about how when you don't tell what's going on in your community, how those things can backfire. You so caught up in trying to stick within hood culture and street culture that you not snitching and something happens to you and your family. Now you ready to go off and ready to call the police. That's how it happens. In the episode, Riley was caught up in trying to be street, like I'm not gonna snitch on nobody, even though he knew who was doing the crimes. He knew it was people that he was closely connected to. He didn't snitch, and they end up stealing from him. Right? They were stealing from the whole community. When they stole from him, it was a problem. That represents a lot of people's in the black community's attachment to the stop snitching culture. And really, that culture only derives from street stuff. When people are doing street activity together, and they say when you get caught by the police, don't you go and rat out everybody else that was involved because you knew the consequences of this street behavior. And that's what it applies to, not everyday life. If you know somebody's killing dudes in the community, call the police, because he can harm your family and your friends. Just the Boondocks had so many like life teaching moments. Even the episode Granddad was dating the woman on social media, and he was lying about how he looked, what he did for a living, what was his hobbies, just to impress a woman. And in the episode, the woman was listening to her friend the whole time instead of just following her heart about the granddad. His name is Robert Freeman. And the friends drove her to kill herself. Like, she was just so infatuated with what her friends were saying and what society was saying about stuff that she drove herself crazy and ultimately killed herself instead of living her life and living for her and doing what she wanted to do, which was date Granddad. So I think the Boondocks is brilliant. I haven't watched season 4 because Aaron Magruder wasn't involved, but great show. You got to watch Boondocks, man.